My name is Stacy, and I have something truly life-changing to share with you. A few months ago, I experienced something I never thought was possible, something that changed my entire perspective on life and faith. It all started on an ordinary day, but within moments, I found myself in a completely different reality. I fainted, and what I saw while I was unconscious left me speechless. Jesus appeared to me and showed me terrifying truths about the mark of the beast. I feel compelled to share this experience with you because I believe it's a warning we all need to hear. It was a typical morning, just like any other. I woke up, went through my usual routine, and thought about the errands I needed to run that day. Little did I know, my life was about to take a turn I could have never imagined. I remember feeling a bit off, like something was weighing on me, but I ignored it. I told myself it was just stress or lack of sleep. I went on with my day, brushing aside the feeling that something wasn't right. By noon, I was at home, trying to finish up some chores. I remember standing in the kitchen when a sudden wave of dizziness hit me. It wasn't like anything I had ever felt before. My vision blurred, my heart raced, and within seconds, everything went dark. I couldn't feel anything, couldn't hear anything. It was like I had been completely shut out from the world. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor, confused and scared. But something was different. The room felt strange, like I wasn't really there. I sat up slowly, trying to get my bearings, but everything around me seemed distant. It wasn't until I noticed the light, an impossibly bright yet soothing light, that I realized I was experiencing something far beyond anything I had known before. It's hard to explain the feeling that washed over me at that moment. I wasn't scared anymore, but I knew I wasn't in my kitchen anymore either. A deep sense of calm mixed with an overwhelming presence filled the space. I couldn't see where it was coming from, but I knew something, or someone, was there. I tried to speak, but my voice wouldn't come out. Then, suddenly, a figure appeared in front of me. I knew instantly who it was: Jesus. He didn't say a word at first, but his eyes looked right through me, and I felt everything I had ever done in my life flash before me. It was as if he already knew every thought I had ever had, every mistake, every fear. I couldn't move, but I didn't need to. He wasn't there to judge me. He was there to show me something, and that's when it all started to make sense. The feeling I had earlier in the day, the sense that something was off, it was leading up to this. I wasn't meant to ignore it. I was meant to experience this, to see something that I could never have imagined on my own. That day, everything changed for me, and I knew there was no going back. It happened so fast that I didn't even have time to react. One moment I was standing in my kitchen, and the next, everything went black. I didn't feel myself falling, didn't feel the impact of hitting the floor. It was like I had been pulled out of my body and thrown into an endless void. I remember trying to move, but nothing worked. My mind was racing, but my body felt frozen. At first, I thought it was just a fainting spell. Maybe I hadn't eaten enough or had too much coffee that morning. But this was different. This wasn't just a blackout. This was something far more intense. The darkness was thick, almost like it was alive, and it wrapped around me in a way that made me feel trapped. I could hear faint whispers, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. They weren't voices I recognized, and the sound filled me with an uneasiness I can't put into words. I tried to call out, but it was like my voice didn't exist anymore. It was terrifying, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely powerless. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, a soft golden light started to break through the darkness. It was faint at first, like a small flicker in the distance, but it grew brighter with each passing second. The whispers faded, and suddenly I felt like I could breathe again. Before I knew it, I was standing, not in my kitchen, but in a vast, endless space filled with light. It wasn't like any place I had ever seen before, but I knew it was real. The fear that had gripped me moments ago was replaced by an overwhelming sense of peace. I wasn't alone anymore. I looked around, searching for answers, and that's when I saw him. Jesus. He stood there, radiating a love so pure it brought tears to my eyes. He reached out his hand, and in that moment I felt everything change. The darkness that had surrounded me before was gone, and I knew that I was standing in the presence of something divine. As I stood in the presence of that overwhelming light, I realized I wasn't in my home anymore. I had crossed over into a place that defied all human understanding. Everything around me felt surreal, yet incredibly real at the same time. It was like stepping into a different dimension, one where time didn't exist, and the air was filled with an indescribable peace. The atmosphere was unlike anything I had ever experienced. There was no fear, no pain, no confusion. Instead, a sense of clarity washed over me. The ground beneath my feet wasn't solid, yet I could walk. The sky above wasn't blue, but it radiated a golden glow that seemed to pulse with life itself. I couldn't see the source of the light, but I could feel it touching every part of my being. As I walked forward, I saw glimpses of places and people, but they weren't fully formed. It was as if I was being shown glimpses of different realities, each more profound than the last. I saw people praying, crying, rejoicing, and even suffering all at once. It felt like I was being given a panoramic view of humanity, both in the physical world and beyond. Then, something strange happened. I heard a voice, not loud but clear and direct. It wasn't coming from around me but from within me. "You were chosen to see this, Stacy," the voice said. I didn't recognize it, but I knew it wasn't my own. There was a weight to the words, a certainty that filled me with both awe and responsibility. I took another step forward and found myself standing before what looked like a shimmering veil. It was thin, almost transparent, and I could see faint silhouettes moving behind it. I knew I had to go through it, but a part of me hesitated. What would I find on the other side? As I hesitated, the voice spoke again, "Trust in me." Taking a deep breath, I stepped through the veil, and what I saw next left me breathless. The world beyond was unlike anything I could have ever imagined. It was both beautiful and terrifying, filled with scenes of hope and despair. I saw angels and demons locked in battle, people making choices that determined their eternity, and an overwhelming sense of urgency hanging in the air. I realized I was being shown a spiritual war that had been happening all along, a battle between good and evil that most people were completely unaware of. It was happening right now, and every choice we made in our daily lives had consequences in this unseen realm. In that moment, I understood that I was being shown these things for a reason. This wasn't just a dream or a hallucination. It was real, and I was meant to share it. As soon as I crossed through the veil, everything around me was consumed by a blinding light. It wasn't harsh or painful, but it was so pure that I felt exposed. Like every part of me, every thought, and every hidden emotion was laid bare. I couldn't see where it was coming from at first, but I could feel its presence pulling me closer. Then, through the radiance, I saw him. Jesus stood before me, and I can't even begin to describe the love and power that radiated from him. His eyes were filled with such deep compassion that I felt an overwhelming sense of peace just by looking into them. It was as if he could see right through me, every mistake, every doubt, every moment of pain, and yet he didn't turn away. Instead, He reached out his hand, and in that instant, I knew I was safe. I fell to my knees, unable to speak. I wanted to ask so many questions, to understand why I was there and what was happening, but words failed me. Jesus didn't need me to speak. He already knew. His voice was gentle yet filled with authority as he said, "Fear not, for I am with you." With a single gesture, he showed me things I couldn't comprehend. I saw a world on the brink of something enormous, people unaware of the dangers lurking just beneath the surface. He showed me cities filled with chaos, confusion, and deception. Then he pointed, and suddenly I saw people lined up, willingly accepting a strange mark on their hands and foreheads. They were smiling, thinking they were making life easier, but I could feel the darkness behind it. Jesus looked at me and said, "This is the great deception." I watched in horror as the people with the mark changed. They lost their sense of self, their souls dimmed, and their eyes turned empty. They were no longer free, they belonged to something else. The world had convinced them it was necessary, but they didn't realize what they were giving up. Tears streamed down my face as I turned to Jesus, and he simply nodded, his expression filled with sorrow. "Warn them," he said, placing his hand over my heart. At that moment, I felt a warmth that filled every part of me, and I knew he was giving me the strength to carry this message. The light around him grew brighter, and I felt myself being pulled away, back toward the world I had left behind. I didn't want to go, but I knew I had to. The last thing I heard was his voice whispering, "I am always with you." And then I woke up, forever changed. As I stood there in the radiant presence of Jesus, my heart pounded with both awe and dread. He turned his gaze toward the horizon, and suddenly it was as if the world unfolded before my eyes like a giant screen. I saw people in bustling cities, living their everyday lives, unaware of what was happening behind the scenes. Then my focus was drawn to something specific, people receiving a mark on their hands and foreheads. At first it seemed harmless. They were smiling, relieved even, as if they had just gained access to something they had long desired. But as I looked closer, I saw a darkness hidden behind their expressions. The mark, which appeared to be a small, intricate symbol, was more than just an identifier. It was a form of control. Jesus' voice echoed softly, "This is what they will not see until it is too late." I could see the way it altered them, how their thoughts were no longer their own. It was as if their very souls were being suppressed. They moved mechanically, following orders without questioning, and I could sense an emptiness in their eyes. Something vital was missing. Jesus continued to show me scenes of governments, corporations, and leaders promoting the mark as a solution for global unity and security. It was advertised as a necessity for buying, selling, and even daily survival. The deception was so subtle, so enticing, that people welcomed it without resistance. But then I saw those who refused the mark, ordinary people like me who sensed something was wrong. They were cast aside, ridiculed, and treated as outcasts. Some faced severe consequences for their refusal, losing their jobs, homes, and even their families. The pressure to conform was immense, yet a small group stood firm, clinging to their faith with unwavering strength. Jesus looked at me with sadness in his eyes and said, "Tell them, Stacy. Many will fall for this illusion, but my sheep will hear my voice and resist." His words filled me with urgency. I knew I was being shown this vision to warn others before it was too late. The mark wasn't just about control over transactions, it was about surrendering one's soul to darkness. I saw the spiritual consequences, the gradual loss of free will, the slow erosion of human connection to God. It was a deception so deep that without spiritual discernment, even the strongest would be tempted to accept it. Before I could fully grasp everything, the vision faded, and I was left with a heavy heart. The world needed to know the truth before it was too late. As Jesus continued to guide me through what seemed like glimpses of the future, I saw a world that had completely changed. The mark had become a part of everyday life, integrated into every system: shopping, healthcare, travel, and even communication. It was presented as progress, an advancement that made life easier and more convenient. But beneath the surface, I could feel the suffocating weight of control. People walked around with their heads down, immersed in their devices, oblivious to the spiritual chains that bound them. There was no room for free thought, no space for faith or hope. Those who embraced the mark lived under the illusion of freedom, but their choices were pre-programmed, their desires manipulated. It was a world that functioned like a well-oiled machine, efficient but devoid of soul. I saw families divided. Parents pleaded with their children not to accept the mark, while others encouraged it, believing it was for their own good. Churches stood empty, their doors locked, and faith was seen as an outdated concept. Those who tried to resist were monitored, tracked, and eventually silenced. The most terrifying part was how easily it happened. There was no dramatic moment of takeover, no grand announcement. It crept in slowly, disguising itself as convenience and necessity until people no longer questioned it. They lined up willingly, believing they were securing their future, unaware of the eternal consequences. Jesus showed me the truth behind the leaders of this new system. They weren't just people seeking power. There was something darker driving them, something that thrived on deception and control. I saw glimpses of shadowy figures whispering lies into the ears of those in power, convincing them they were doing what was best for humanity. Then I saw a flicker of hope, a small group of believers hidden away, holding on to their faith despite the persecution. They prayed, they encouraged each other, and they resisted. Their light, though small, was powerful enough to pierce through the overwhelming darkness. Jesus spoke softly, "It will not be easy, but those who endure will receive my crown of life." I felt both fear and determination rising within me. The choice would not be easy, but it would be clear. The scenes before me shifted, and I was taken deeper into the deception that was spreading across the world. It wasn't just the mark itself, it was the ideology behind it. The media, celebrities, and influential figures all promoted it as the ultimate solution to the world's problems. They spoke of unity, progress, and safety, but their words were laced with subtle manipulation. People believed they were making a choice, but in reality, they were being led down a carefully designed path. The deception was so convincing that even those who once held strong beliefs were beginning to question themselves. I saw churches divided, with some leaders encouraging acceptance of the mark, calling it God's plan, while others were silenced for speaking the truth. False prophets rose, claiming divine revelation that justified the mark. They twisted scripture, blending lies with just enough truth to make it believable. Jesus' voice echoed in my heart, "They will come in my name, but they do not know me." The most heart-wrenching part was watching people I once knew, friends, family, fall into the trap. They believed they were making the right decision, unaware of the spiritual chains being placed upon them. I wanted to scream, to warn them, but I couldn't reach them. Jesus reminded me, "Only those who seek me with all their heart will see the truth." It became clear that the battle wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. I turned to Jesus, overwhelmed by everything I had seen. He looked at me with deep compassion and said, You must share what you have seen." I felt the weight of his words, realizing the urgency of the message he was entrusting me with. The world needed to know what was coming. The signs were already here: wars, division, confusion, and fear. People were searching for answers in the wrong places, looking to the world instead of God. Jesus warned that the deception would come in ways we least expect, blending truth and lies so seamlessly that without him we wouldn't be able to tell the difference. He told me to stay strong, to trust in him, and to encourage others to do the same. I knew that speaking out wouldn't be easy, but I couldn't stay silent. The world was on the brink, and every moment counted. Before I could ask anything else, Jesus touched my forehead gently, and everything around me faded. I woke up gasping for air, back in my room, but my heart knew. I had been given a mission. As I tried to process everything Jesus had shown me, he turned my attention to an even greater truth: the battle between good and evil. It was no longer just a distant concept or a metaphor. It was real, happening all around us in ways I had never imagined. I saw a vast battlefield stretching beyond my sight, filled with forces beyond human understanding. On one side I saw angels, majestic, radiant beings clothed in light, standing firm with swords that glowed with divine power. Their presence radiated peace and strength, yet they were prepared for war. On the other side, I saw dark, shadowy figures, their eyes burning with malice. They moved with deception, whispering lies into the ears of those on earth, leading them down paths they believed were their own choices. Jesus explained that the battle wasn't fought with physical weapons, but with faith, prayer, and obedience. Every thought, every choice, and every action we take aligns us with one side or the other. I saw how fear and doubt were some of the enemy's greatest weapons, keeping people trapped and unable to see the truth. It became clear to me that the battle wasn't just for our bodies, but for our souls. The enemy worked tirelessly to distract, deceive, and destroy everything good, while God's forces stood ready to guide and protect those who sought him. I saw people standing strong in their faith, resisting temptations and lies, shining as beacons of hope. Their prayers acted like shields, deflecting the attacks of the darkness. Jesus reminded me that while the enemy is strong, God is stronger. "Those who call upon my name will never be forsaken," he said. At that moment I realized that despite the chaos in the world, those who truly trust in him are never alone. The battle rages on, but victory belongs to those who remain faithful. After witnessing the ongoing spiritual battle, Jesus showed me something even more profound: the realities of heaven and hell. He wanted me to understand what was truly at stake, and as soon as he touched my hand, I felt myself being lifted into a realm of indescribable beauty. Heaven was beyond anything words could describe. The colors were brighter, the air was filled with music that resonated deep within my soul, and there was an overwhelming sense of joy and love. I saw people dressed in white robes, their faces filled with peace, standing in the presence of God. They radiated an indescribable happiness, free from pain, sorrow, or fear. Every soul was cherished, and love was the only language spoken. But just as quickly, I was taken to see the opposite: hell. The shift was immediate, and I felt a crushing weight of despair. The air was thick with sorrow and fear, and the cries of tormented souls echoed endlessly. I saw people reaching out, desperate for a second chance, but it was too late. They had ignored the warnings, and now they were trapped in eternal regret. Jesus stood beside me, his eyes filled with sadness, and said, "It was never meant to be this way. I desire that none should perish, but many choose their own path." I could barely breathe as I realized how final those choices were. determine where we will spend eternity. As he pulled me back, I knew I had to share this truth with others. I had to warn them that the time to choose was now. As I tried to absorb everything I had seen, Jesus spoke about the importance of free will. He explained that God had given each of us the power to choose, whether to follow him or the ways of the world. This gift of free will was both beautiful and heavy, carrying consequences that stretched far beyond this life. I was shown moments in my own life where I had been faced with choices. Some I had made in faith, and others in fear. Each decision, no matter how small, rippled into eternity. I realized how often we underestimate the power of our choices, whether it's in our words, our actions, or even our thoughts. Jesus showed me people standing at crossroads, unsure which path to take. Some were swayed by the comforts of the world, choosing convenience over conviction. Others struggled, torn between what they wanted and what was right. I could see angels guiding those who sought wisdom, but ultimately the final decision rested with each person. He said, "I stand at the door and knock, but only you can let me in." These words struck deep, making me realize that Jesus does not force himself into our lives. He waits for us to invite him. The weight of free will was heavy, but it was also liberating. I understood that our lives are filled with daily choices, and each one is an opportunity to align ourselves with God's purpose. Even when we make mistakes, he is always ready to guide us back. The question is, will we listen? Before I could ask another question, Jesus' expression grew serious. He looked at me with a sense of urgency and said, "Time is running out." I felt my heart sink because I understood what he meant. The world is moving faster than ever, and the spiritual battle is intensifying. Jesus showed me how distractions, temptations, and worldly desires are keeping people from seeking the truth. People are so consumed with their daily lives, jobs, entertainment, social media, that they don't realize the spiritual war happening around them. The enemy is using these distractions to lull people into complacency, making them believe there's always more time. But there isn't. Jesus made it clear that now is the time to prepare, to strengthen our faith, and to draw closer to God. He showed me people who were preparing spiritually, praying, reading the Word, and standing firm in their beliefs despite the challenges. These people were like spiritual warriors, equipped and ready for the days ahead. I was reminded that preparation isn't just about knowledge. It's about having a deep relationship with God. Jesus said, "Those who know me will not be deceived." That statement echoed in my heart, and I knew it was a call to action, not just for me, but for everyone. Jesus urged me to share this message with the world, to tell people to wake up and seek him while there is still time. The urgency was undeniable, and I knew that from this moment on, my life would never be the same. As I stood in the presence of Jesus, feeling the weight of everything I had seen and learned, I suddenly felt a shift. The light around me began to fade, and I felt an invisible pull drawing me back. Panic surged within me. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay in that place of peace, love, and understanding. But Jesus gently placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "You must return, Stacy. Your mission is not yet complete." Before I could say anything, I felt myself being pulled through the veil of light. In an instant, I was back in my room, lying on the floor, gasping for air. My heart was racing, my mind overwhelmed, and my body felt weak, yet something inside me had changed forever. I sat up, looking around at the familiar surroundings of my home, but everything felt different, almost foreign. The experience was so vivid, so real, that it felt like I had been gone for years. I struggled to process everything I had just witnessed. The weight of the responsibility that Jesus had placed upon me felt immense. I realized I couldn't just go back to living my life the way I used to. I had been shown a warning, a truth that the world needed to hear. But where would I even start? Who would believe me? As I sat there trying to make sense of it all, I felt a deep sense of urgency. I knew that Jesus didn't show me all of this just for my own sake. He wanted me to share it, to be a voice for those who were still blind to the deception of the world. Fear crept into my heart. What if people mocked me? What if they thought I was crazy? But then I remembered Jesus' words, "Fear not, for I am with you." With trembling hands, I reached for my phone and started writing everything down. I knew I had to document it before the details faded. Each word I typed felt like a small step of obedience, and with each sentence the fear began to subside. I realized that it wasn't about how people would react. It was about being faithful to the mission I had been given. Returning to life wasn't easy. I struggled with doubts, with moments where I questioned if it had really happened. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had seen Jesus. I had witnessed the reality of heaven and hell, and now it was up to me to share it. I knew I couldn't keep what I had seen to myself. The message Jesus had given me was too important, too urgent, but how could I even begin? I wasn't a preacher or a scholar, just a regular teenage girl, and yet I felt compelled to share my experience with as many people as possible. The first person I told was my mother. She listened with one glance, holding my hand as I explained every detail. At first, she was skeptical, but as I spoke, tears welled in her eyes. She could feel the sincerity in my voice, and by the time I was done, she hugged me and said, "Stacy, God gave you this for a reason." Encouraged by her support, I started sharing my experience with close friends and my church community. Some listened with curiosity, while others were more hesitant, unsure of what to make of it. I realized that not everyone would believe me, and that was okay. My job wasn't to convince them, it was to share the truth and let God work in their hearts. Social media became another platform where I could reach people beyond my immediate circle. I created posts, videos, and messages explaining what I had seen, urging people to turn to Jesus before it was too late. To my surprise, the response was overwhelming. Some people reached out, sharing their own spiritual experiences, while others asked how they could prepare for what was coming. There were also critics, people who dismissed my experience as a hallucination or a dream. At first their words stung, but I reminded myself of what Jesus said, "My sheep hear my voice." I learned to focus on those who were open and seeking, instead of those who were unwilling to listen. More than anything, I wanted people to understand that the battle for our souls is real. The deception of the world is growing stronger every day, and without faith, it's easy to be led astray. I encouraged everyone to read the Bible, to seek God's guidance, and to pray for discernment. Jesus had shown me that the only way to stay strong in the coming days was to remain close to Him. As I continued to share, I realized that my life had taken on a new purpose. It was no longer about fitting in or chasing after things that didn't matter. My eyes had been opened, and I couldn't turn back.